Okay, so good morning and thank you to our candidates for attending this roundtable today. I'm going to start first with introducing myself. I am Kate Kidd and I'm the current 2022 PKAR president. And joining me here today, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Garnet Northey, president of Peterborough-Kawartha Home Builders Association.
Thank you. As you can imagine, housing is top of mind for the membership of both PKAR and the Peterborough Home Builders Association. So we appreciate all of you making time today to come in and chat with us. I want to quickly explain the flow of today's event. It's very much an open discussion, and we ask that each of you be respectful of each other and mindful of your time. Our goal here today is to hear from our leadership candidates and to discuss opportunities to address the issues related to housing that we're all experiencing in our community. The Peterborough Home Builders and PKAR have developed specific questions, and they have been provided to you all in advance. And as we move through the topics, we may add follow-up questions or ask for further clarification. Our attendees and are observers only for today's session, and this will be recorded and made available to the public following today's event. Any questions regarding any of that? Okay, so I'm going to quickly just introduce our candidates today. So we have Dave Smith, the Conservatives, and further to Dave, we have Robert Gibson of the Green Party, and we have Greg Dempsey of the Liberals, and last but not least, we have Jen Deck of the NDP. There we are. Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for being here this morning. We really appreciate it. So we're going to just jump right into it, and we're going to start with an opening question, and we'll just kind of go down the line in terms of getting your responses. So the first question of today. We consistently hear the argument that not enough housing is being built, and the excuses is always red tape. What is the red tape? Where is the disconnect? And how do you propose to address this? So Jen, you can start if you don't mind.
Thanks very much. My name is Jen Deck, she, her, and I acknowledge that we are on the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississauga and Anishinaabeg, and we are all part of Treaty 20. Good regulation exists for important reasons, but we also know that regulations can get bound up and convoluted and redundant and sometimes, frankly, inappropriate and harmful. The NDP is in favor of harmonizing regulations that are duplicative, and we're in favor of making navigating them much easier. We want to work with the business community and Ontario's public services to ensure that regulatory changes are done both responsibly and in a way that makes it easier to run a business. Thank you.
Thanks. Greg?
Thank you very much. My name is Greg Dempsey. I'm the Ontario Liberal Party candidate for Peterborough-Kawartha. I want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 20 territory, the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations. It's a pleasure to be here. I think that we're all going to hear a lot of agreement that we need to build more homes. And the question for everybody here, and the big challenge, is how do we get that done? And you're going to see two very differing versions of how to build more homes. We have the Ford Conservatives plan, which is to essentially remove all environmental regulations, to put ministerial zoning orders on steroids, and to essentially punish municipalities for not approving homes quickly enough. And you're going to hear about our plan to work with municipalities to reward municipalities that help to change their rules to get the more homes built that we need, but also to make sure that we're building safe, affordable homes in the places that people need. So the question was about regulations. The first thing I want to say is that sometimes regulations are really important. They protect our environment, they protect the character of our neighborhoods and our cities and our municipalities, but we also need to make sure that they're not creating undue hindrance for the homes that we need. And so that's why we need a balanced approach. Of course, we need to review regulations where they are holding up home buildings in the communities that we need, but also they protect the wetlands, the protected areas, and everything that we hold dear here in Peterborough-Kawartha and across the entire province. So I would say that it's not always red tape. Sometimes we need to make sure that we are checking on whether the places we're building are appropriate. But if we partner with municipalities and have a meaningful, positive relationship, then that's the way. Then we could get the approvals that we need and the homes that we want built in time. Thanks.
Thank you. And as we move to Robert and to Dave, I want to maybe hone it down a little bit. We all, I think, can agree red tape to some degree is necessary. We need protection of our environment. We need to build safe and sturdy homes. But there's excessive delay, and I guess you could probably speak more clearly to this than I can. Excessive delay and maybe some layers of unnecessary costs. So moving down the line for both of you, can you be more specific in terms of how can we reduce some of that and facilitate getting shovels in the ground? Robert?
Okay. Thank you. I agree with what the other two candidates previously have said. Part of the issue is council hasn't been told specifically which red tape is hindering development. So there's a communications gap. Cuts to legal aid and influence delays. There's also a lack of staffing and municipal funding, because if there's less staff, there's more delays in the system. So municipalities have to be properly funded. In addition, long application delays caused by unreasonable timelines pointed out by Councillor Kim Zippel, and the lack of support for non-profit organizations is another barrier to development, as well as finance of projects. And we plan to have low interest loans for nonprofits and direct capital for nonprofit organizations to build more affordable homes.
Thank you, Robert. Dave?
Well, I'll start off by introducing myself, and since we're with home builders and realtors, I'm Dave Smith. I can't sell your house. I will not be able to sell you insurance for your house, and I can't fix the HVAC system in your house. Those are all different Dave Smiths in our community. With respect to red tape, we need regulations, obviously, right? But we need to be regulating to the point of integrity, not to the point of interference. And what we have seen is that a lot of times, those regulations have been weaponized to delay. They have been weaponized to defer and to make sure that something doesn't get developed. When I was first elected, one of the things that was said to me by a number of the developers is that it's not uncommon for it to take 12 years from the start of the process for a subdivision until they actually get the first shovels in the ground. Those are all carrying costs that get passed on to the consumer. That's not acceptable. One of the things that we have changed is that whole process on it. And we're putting in what are effectively service level agreements. Now, there are some who are saying we're punishing the municipalities. We're not punishing the municipalities. We're making sure that the municipalities are actually doing the work that they're supposed to do to get things done. If you can't review a zoning bylaw, if you can't review the zoning and make changes to it, make a decision on whether or not you should make a change to it in a timely manner, the question has to be asked why. And that's what these service level agreements are doing now. They're making sure that the municipalities do what they're supposed to do the review that they're supposed to do, so that we're not taking significant time in delaying that. We're also changing some of the process so that the appeals process is streamlined. There's a timeline for third parties to come in and make recommendations or to make objections to it, rather than have it as something that is open-ended and they could come in at any point partway through it to add a further delay. Those are all things that have been done previously to, as I said, weaponize and cause delays. We know that there are a lot of individuals who don't want a neighborhood to change, and I completely understand that and respect it. But we also recognize that we have to have housing. We know that the population of Ontario is going to increase by about 2.5 million people over the next 10 years. We have to have homes for them. We have to have apartments for them. We have to have condominiums for them. We have to have some place for them to live. And we have to speed up the process to make all of that happen. And if we don't, then we end up with some of the problems that we have here in Peterborough, where we're effectively landlocked. It's very difficult to build new homes, to build new apartments, to make it easy for someone to get into one of those places. And that's something that we have to address, and we've started to address it with the More Homes, More Choice bill and the More Homes for Everyone that was just recently passed in March of this year. Both of these things are things that will make a difference for us, and it's happened with consultation with AMO, and we'll continue to be making changes to the housing supply here in Ontario as the next 4 years go on, because you have to make those adjustments to make sure that we're getting the homes built quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. It might help with your answers as well. We know as an industry at the association, the hurdle is the municipalities, plain and simple. That is where the holdups are. City of Peterborough has an extensive report they used government money for that clearly identifies where those are getting held up in the process. So it does take 10 to 15 years to get a shovel in the ground and then another couple to get a house built, which is ridiculous. So when we ask questions, maybe look at it from that point of view, because that is the problem, very clear. One is severe lack of staffing. Lack of accountability is identified in there. There's a culture of no accountability at the municipal levels. That is very clear in the report that was commissioned. The other is NIMBYism. Those that are stopping people from owning homes are, oddly enough, homeowners, deciding that others are not allowed to live in the community that they enjoy. So just keep that in mind as we go through the questions.
And so maybe just to try to, oh, my mic's way off. Maybe to try and drill down a little bit further, where we're all recognizing it is something that we need corrected at the municipal level. Definitely a shortage of staff and is delaying things to a great degree. Further to that, do you have any specific proposals to help speed that process along, specifically at the municipal level? Greg, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah. Thank you. And so our community knows best when it comes to where and how we need to build more homes. And I think this is another clear contrast between our plan and the Ford Conservatives' plan. So as you probably know, there's a new $45 million Streamlined Development Approval Fund that has been approved by the Ford government here in Ontario. That would apply to the 39 largest municipalities. Peterborough is not one of them. And Peterborough-Kawartha will not see a single dollar of that funding to help build more homes and help the municipality, as you rightly mentioned, which does not have enough resources in the planning department to get those homes approved. So our plan will be to provide $300 million in new funding over 5 years. This will help support the use of community planning permits that help build more homes and get them to market faster. And we'll update the Ontario Growth Planning Framework to recognize that building homes for all current and future Ontarians is a fundamental obligation of local governments. We'll increase housing targets in highly unaffordable communities, and that includes Peterborough-Kawartha, and more accurately estimate housing demand. As well, and I think, again, this is a big contrast to our approach, will reward local governments that meet or exceed housing targets in an environmentally sustainable manner with dedicated capital funding for use for local priorities like better transit, community amenities like parks and libraries. We'll also find and eliminate bottlenecks in new housing by requiring municipalities to regularly publish transparent housing statistics, such as approval timelines and building permits issued. So it's not just about making sure that the communities themselves want to have more housing, of course, and you've mentioned quite rightly that sometimes neighbors are concerned with traffic or too many new housing starts. What we need to do is make sure that municipalities have the resources to provide the services like transit and parks and schools and others to make sure that people are welcoming of those new neighbors that we know we need in our community. Thanks.
And just a follow-up question on that. You mentioned 300 million. Is, of that 300 million, any rough idea what would be earmarked specifically for Peterborough and the Kawarthas?
Yeah, so that funding would be across the entire province. I did mention that the Ford government's plan is to provide $45 million, and zero of those dollars will go to Peterborough-Kawartha. So of that $300 million, we will get our share. And I think your question, again, speaks to the need to have a local MPP that's going to be fighting for funding for our community. We've seen in a number of different instances that Peterborough-Kawartha has not gotten our fair share of funding. And I think with an effective local MPP that is in the office, in the ministry responsible, we can make sure that we get our fair share of that funding.
Thank you. Anybody else like to jump in on this?
Yeah, I think if you take a look at what we have done on the last two bills on housing, let's start with More Homes, More Choices. We provided municipalities with an opportunity to make changes to a control bylaw so that you could put a secondary suite into any single-family residential. That is going to take some of the pressure off because it creates additional housing within the community. But I can't force a municipality to take advantage of that. And the city of Peterborough chose not to. They chose not to do that. We have a housing crisis in Peterborough. That's a tool that they could have used. And they said, nope, sorry, don't want it. Then with the More Homes for Everyone, we are making service level agreements, as I said earlier, so that it will speed up the process. They have to get things done at the municipal level so that the development can actually happen. It is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, that it's 12 to 15 years to build something in this community. Every time there has been an opportunity for new development here in Peterborough, it's been blocked. All we have to do is look at some of the apartment complexes that the developers have had to go to the LPAT because the city said something that didn't make sense. And I'll give an example from one councillor who said, it doesn't feel right to build that many apartments. I feel like it should be 3 stories instead. Traffic study said, no, it can handle it. The utilities study said, no, it can handle it. The need is absolutely here. But the decision was not based on evidence. It was not based on science. It was based on a feeling. And when it went to LPAT, LPAT said, council got it wrong. You're going to be able to build it. But it delayed it by 3 years. That adds to the cost. That means everyone in this community who wants to move into that is going to pay more for it. We do have to hold the municipalities responsible for it. We do have to change the legislation and the regulations so that municipalities are forced to act upon it because we need housing right now. If you look at the official plan for Peterborough, they made modifications to it, and they took out a section that would have allowed for 6,500 homes to be built, and they turned it into employment land. But it's a drumlin. You cannot build large-scale warehousing on that because it's a drumlin. It was designed, it was originally zoned for residential. That's 6,500 homes that have been taken out. They were not in the process of being built yet, but they'll never be built because it's now been decided that it's employment land. And 3 months after the official plan was submitted, the city of Peterborough stepped forward to block Cavan Monaghan from doing a development on the border because the city said, we need that land. Well, Why would you come out 3 months after your official plan was put forward and say, no, we got it wrong. We need to have more of this land for development for Peterborough as well. You should have thought of that 3 months earlier when the city had the opportunity to delay the official plan by mere weeks to have that conversation with Cavan Monaghan. This is something that has to happen at the municipal level. They have to be able to work together. They have to work together. Because unfortunately, for all of Peterborough, the greater Peterborough area, the city itself is the core, and what happens in the city affects what happens in the county. And the city has to work with their county partners to make sure that we're doing things that benefit the entire region.
Thank you.
Kate, can I respond next? Oh, sorry, did you want to?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I do just have one question, and then
Sure.
if it's okay, I'll go to you, Jen. I may have heard you incorrectly. Just at the beginning of that, there's a few things I could respond to on that. You mentioned the secondary suites, and you're saying Peterborough did not?
Peterborough did not implement a control bylaw that allows for secondary suites in single-family residential homes. That is something
I
that-
think I read in the paper
believe
just
we-
yesterday that has actually been approved.
Yeah, we do have a bylaw that did make significant changes to the allowability of secondary suites, and one of the big ones is it removed the zoning component of it. So it is more widespread available to allow for secondary suites. What I hear specifically from landlords regarding that is it is still a very drawn-out, cumbersome process for them to, for example, if they have an existing basement apartment, they can now go through the process of legalizing it, but it's quite cumbersome, and a lot of them are, for lack of a better word, afraid to approach the city because of the process that they've heard of. So we do have that availability as landlords. It's just
To grandfather
yeah.
in existing ones that had been built, yes, but not to add new ones.
You can add new ones in the city of Peterborough, actually. However, here's a prime example. The province told municipalities in 2013 you had to allow this. It took Peterborough 8 years to put a policy together. In the meantime, substantial numbers of illegal units were built in this city. And that's the problem right there.
Yeah.
That should have happened in 2013.
Yeah, certainly, I think we can all agree that when we talk about red tape, we're talking about unnecessary, cumbersome regulation, not the good regulation that frankly we all agree is important. Sometimes it doesn't go the way we want it to go, but we can understand the spirit of that. What I wanted to say was I really appreciated the clarification you made, Kate, about the fact that that we all are wanting good things for the community. I think it can often be framed as landlords and real estate and builders are the bad guys and renters and buyers are the good guys, and that's just not fair and it's not true. The reality is that many homeowners themselves are small-time landlords, and we know there are really good ethical landlords and builders and contractors. My son is in the building industry, and I know that he is very ethical. I would have loved him to move to buy a house in Peterborough, but he had to move to Halifax to buy his house. So I'm totally in agreement with you, and I think there's no disagreement that we need more housing in Peterborough of all types. So we're also not running for municipal government. So I'm not in a position where I can defend or make claims about that level of government. But we do know that it's really important for the provincial government and the municipal government to work collaboratively and in a positive way. I am not a specialist in this area by any stretch. I told one of our hosts today, aside from renting a bunch of places and buying 2 houses over my lifetime, that's kind of the extent of it. What I can tell you is I am really good at collaborating. I work well with people even when I disagree with them. And I'll give you an example. I'm the president of the elementary teachers of Kawartha Pine Ridge, and I am constantly in communication with school board officials, the directors, superintendents. We are often not in agreement on issues. and I collectively bargain with them. They are on the other side of the table. But in the years that I've worked with them, I can honestly say, I can genuinely say, if you asked them what they thought of me, they would say that I am kind, I am honest, and I don't make commitments that I won't keep. So this is the kind of MPP I believe you need in Peterborough-Kawartha, so that we can work with the municipalities and we can work with all of the stakeholders, with real estate, with builders, with the environmental specialists, with people who specialize in housing the unhomed, and with specialists who are looking at how to green up our spaces, how to make biking accessible for people so that they can get to, simple groceries by walking or hopping on a bike, making sure that houses are close to schools. The grand plan is really important that we all work on together. And as your MPP, my job will not be to be the specialist in any one of those areas, but to work collaboratively with you all and consult with you all, and do so in a good spirit and with integrity.
Thank you. Greg or Robert? Robert?
Yeah, I would like to address the official plan. The city was asked to delay the official plan, and by Cavan Monaghan. And if they did delay the official plan, then the province would be required to impose an official plan that would not reflect, that might not reflect the input of the city residents. And those concerns from First Nations that there hasn't been consultation with them as reported in the media. And the Green Party, I agree, NIMBYism is an issue. So the Green Party would have a yes in my backyard campaign. But we have to have public participation in the process. And I do agree that it shouldn't be used to delay all the projects.
So the city was asked to delay the official plan by 2 weeks. They had until July 31st to submit it. They were asked in December to delay it by 2 weeks. It wouldn't have had any effect on whether or not the city could have put the official plan in, because we were talking about 2 weeks in January, not at the end of July. And with respect to the consultation that Robert is talking about, that was for the Kawartha Downs development. That was not for the development on Brown Line that the city has objected to.
Thank you. Greg?
I just want to pick up on something that Dave Smith said, because I think it's really important. So he was speaking about a 3-year delay caused by having to go to LPAD, and the development happened, but it took that extra 3 years because there was disagreement amongst city councillors. Now imagine what had happened if we could work collaboratively with those city councillors and to bring them on board. And I think that is the real difference in the approaches. He spoke about how we need to force municipalities to act. That's one solution, certainly, but it's going to drag people kicking and screaming to the place that we want to get them to. And instead, if we build a collaborative, positive relationship with city councillors, and we have an MPP that's going to be able to work with them to bring them on board, despite concerns, and I think Jen mentioned this, and I think it's really important, when you have that collaborative relationship and you can bring people on board, then you can avoid things like having to go to LPAD and having that 3-year delay, because you can bring city council on board. And so that's why I think having a better, more collaborative relationship with city council is going to be really important. We all have the goal of building more homes. You'll see it in all of the plans that are presented today. but really having a partner, not just for developers, but for environmentalists, the planning department, co-op housing, and others, that's what's going to get those homes built as quickly as possible.
So I have a question, sort of two-part. In your answer, I'll ask you, do you own a home? And what would you say to all the young people out there that hear natural heritage features are more important than you having a home? That species at risk are far more important than you owning a home? That prime agriculture that is unused and not properly ground truthed and mapped is more important than you owning a home? What would you say to those young people who are sitting here today, some of them, who have decided in this country, this province, I will never afford a home and I cannot live where I grew up? What would you say to those people? Because that's what they hear when they hear about more collaboration, because that's what's happening now. There's lots of collaboration. All these things we talk about are happening now, and that is what's causing the problem. So what would you say to those young people?
Robert?
Yes. People care about climate change. We need the environment. We don't want what happened in 2004 to happen again because of increased flooding. We need parks and natural spaces to go to, and we can't. And if we develop our natural spaces, we're increasing the risk of future pandemics locally. And there has been reporting that demonstrates that we have the space available within our cities. The cities have not been densifying adequately. And we have to add to the missing middle that will add affordable homes. We have to do things like adding duplexes, triplexes, and we don't have to decide between destroying wetlands, farmlands, and farmlands, that's economic activity that you're impacting. We can do both, and if we have flooded homes, people aren't going to live in flooded homes, basement apartments. That's a huge issue. So I say that we can protect the environment and add more homes.
Yes, I grew up in Toronto, and I would never have been able to buy a house in Toronto, so I completely understand. Happily, I came to Peterborough to attend Trent University in '92, fell in love with the place, fell in love with a fellow, and made some babies and have been here ever since. So I've rented many, many places. I think for 10 years we were moving on average every 6 months. Have lots of experience with rentals, good and bad. And then in around the turn of the century, we were able to buy our first home on Park Hill Road, right by Inverleigh Park. A real fixer-upper, guys. It was a real fixer-upper for $88,000. That number, even at that time, that number felt like it was out of control. Prices had already started rising, and we were like, we missed the boat. Little did we know. And we own a home currently that's in a more quiet neighborhood that we really love, and we've been slowly over 20 years doing little renovations, hiring skilled trades to do them whenever we could afford it. And so we definitely appreciate the fact that kids do not have the outlook that we had, and that probably most of us in this room had. I will say, though, that the environment is very important, and our natural habitat is very important, and I would argue that today's youth feel that way even more than we do, because it's the world that they will be living in and the world that their children will be living in. So this is a dynamic that it's a balance that we need to find. There is no dispute that if ground truthing has been done and it's incorrect, that's a problem. That's the red tape that we've all agreed is a problem. But if we are not careful with how we do our development, we will end up with flooding in neighborhoods because wetlands were not preserved to be the sponges. And that is ultimately going to decrease the values of our homes. You know, it's counterproductive. My first house was part of this, had a century flood, and 5 years, well, however many years later it was, we moved to our new house right when the next flood happened. So both of my houses have experienced century floods, and we know that that was because we've been covering over our wetlands. We just don't have the sponge to hold the water when we have big rains. We are having more and more severe weather because we have not made the improvements to our climate goals that we've needed to have, that we've known about, frankly, for decades. So in my mind, it's not an either or. We are not choosing to prioritize kids and their ability to access homes and our ability to keep our spaces green and lovely and plan them in a way that coordinates with transit, with house building, our school building, making sure that kids can walk to the corner store or can access a library by foot. All of that kind of planning and making sure that our farms are still there to make food for us and make sure our wetlands are there to enjoy and to provide the services that they do. We should not have to pick. And the NDP is committed with the Green New Deal to build a quarter million more houses, hire many, many skilled trades, and put them to work, and do that all in a way that is environmentally sustainable and that also addresses some real and serious discrimination that affects and disproportionately hurts people of color, people who have disabilities, Indigenous people, etc. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do all of this, and the Green New Democratic Deal is achievable. It's achievable. Sometimes we make the mistake of setting bars too high and we can't make them, and that's discouraging. Sometimes when we talk too much about some of the real crises that are happening, they're real, but if we focus on that, it tends to demoralize us and it stops us from acting. The Green New Democratic Deal is exciting because it's achievable, and it has many benefits. In addition to saving the environment, which we clearly need to do, it will create jobs, it will provide more housing in our communities, and it will finally give our kids the chance to own a home themselves. Thank you.
Greg.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And certainly I agree that we need to make sure that homes are available for first-time home buyers. I've spoken to many, many young people who feel completely priced out by the current market. But I don't want to debate the debate organizers. But I think if we had some young environmentalists in the room, they would tell us that they also do care, as has already been mentioned, about protecting the environment, about protecting our farmlands, about making sure that we are doing development in a sustainable way. So it really does need to be a partnership working together with developers and environmentalists and the planners all together to make sure that we can have the homes that we know we deserve. And we know that the approaches of the last 4 years have not been working. I mean, the average price of homes in Peterborough-Kawartha has gone up by nearly $500,000 under this same business as usual approach. That's why I'm so excited that the province can get into the business of building more homes, and especially those homes that are affordable for first-time home buyers. Right now, the market is doing a great job for people who want to buy million-dollar homes in Peterborough-Kawartha. But if you're looking for your very first home, if you're looking to move into the housing market for the first time, the free market is not working for you. And I want to talk in detail about our plan. So our plan will establish the Ontario Home Building Corporation and task it to work with local communities, not-for-profit housing partners, and developers to build and maintain affordable homes of all types, either as a primary financing source or as a builder. The corporation will also develop surplus provincial lands, including safely burying more electric transmission lines underground. That'll unlock 80,000 acres of land for new homes, and will provide the corporation with historic capital funding with strict oversight, including a hard cap on administrative expenses, and a 15-year mandate to ensure that housing is built rapidly, cool the housing market, and end the wait list for affordable public housing. And any homes sold by the corporation will be available only to first-time home buyers, to make sure that those first-time home buyers that you were talking about can have access to the market. And any proceeds from this Ontario Home Building Corporation will go directly back into creating more affordable homes. And so we really do need to have a focus on those first-time home buyers, as you mentioned, to make sure that they have access to the market. This is the one segment of the market that has not been working right now, and that's why I'm really excited about our plan that will directly help those first-time home buyers.
Garnet, you had asked originally about the natural heritage designation and the prime agriculture designation and some of the challenges that are around that, and I got completely off on other tangents on it. Those were policies that were brought in by the previous Liberal government. We have made 4 substantive bills on housing, and these are all things that we have to make adjustments. I'll go back to an earlier statement that I had said, and that was that we regulate, or we should be regulating, to the point of integrity, but not to the point of interference. And there has to be some adjustments made at the local level for that prime agriculture and the heritage designations. And I'll give a perfect example of it. Pretty much everyone in here knows Daryl Bennett. His home is across the street from an industrial park, but it's zoned as prime agriculture. There are significant challenges that he would have just to pave his driveway, for example. He's across the street from an industrial park. It's not prime agriculture. When that prime agriculture mapping was done, it was somebody in Toronto who looked at the map and said, it's only this far from that spot, so it must be prime agriculture because of that. Didn't take into account the topography of the area. Daryl's on a drumlin. Drumlins are full of rocks. You're not going to be planting significant crops on a drumlin. When you look at North Kawartha, that's the beginning of Canadian Shield. We've got sections in North Kawartha that are classed as prime agriculture. It's Canadian Shield. The only thing you're going to grow are rocks on it. But local municipalities didn't have the ability to make adjustments to it. These are all things that we have to take a look at. We have to look at how do we give the municipalities, how do we empower the municipalities so that they can make those local adjustments where it makes sense. There are a number of farms where the farm family wants to leave the farm to the kids, and they want to sever off an acre or two where they're not able to grow anything, again, because it's full of rocks, but it's classed as prime agriculture, so they can't do that. And they can't leave the family farm to the kids. They have to sell it to them at current market values because they've got to go out and buy another house. These are things that we have to take into account. And I'll say it again because I think it is so true. Regulate to the point of integrity, but not to the point of interference. And unfortunately, we have a number of these things where it's at the point of interference because we need to give some of those municipalities the tools to make adjustments that make sense in those individual cases. We have to have that ability to individualize it. And it's finding that balance so that, again, it doesn't become weaponized by a municipality and they open up far too much at the same time.
All right, thank you. Just want to comment a little bit on these. Just to be clear, the Home Builders Association does support all of these things. My question was positioned specifically. We do support them, but they are interfering. So you are correct. When prime agriculture on natural heritage features were put in place under the Liberal government, ground truthing was completely 100% ignored by local municipal organizations that did the ground truthing. Asked Jeff Leal at the time, who was the agricultural minister, if they just drew a big circle. And his exact words were, we got it absolutely wrong. Okay? Fast forward to the current government. This is happening again, where municipalities have ground truth and looked at what are truly natural heritage features, what is truly prime agricultural land. It is again, I'm sorry, being ignored. Right now, in our local municipality, if you own a farm for 10 years, you could sever a lot and have your child live there and support that farm. The current government is taking away that right 100%, increasing prime agricultural with no opportunity to sever, to move people into urban centers. So my question to each of you, what would your commitment be to partnering, because we've heard that term a lot, and collaboration, we hear it at every election, and then we ask why it didn't happen again. What will your personal commitment be to partnering with local groups, local conservation authorities, to actually ground truth in setting these maps up and allowing people to use their land to accommodate their own children?
Dave, we'll go back to you.
Thanks. Garnet, this is one of those things that our Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing has done a great deal of research on, has done a great deal of consultation on. He's been working with AMO, all 442 municipalities across Ontario on it, and that's why we've had 4 different housing bills that have come forward on it. We need to continue working on that collaboration. When we're doing things at the provincial level, we're doing it across the entire province, so you need to find consensus with all of those municipalities. It's very, very difficult to do something that is one municipality specific on it. I think that Steve Clark has done an excellent job with it, and that's why as I said, we've had 4 bills come forward. There will be more after we're re-elected, because you have to be able to make those adjustments. At times, when you're working with the municipalities, they may not quite be there on where we need to get, so you have to do it in incremental phases. That's why we have taken the approach that we have taken. When we look at prime agriculture, for example, we need to make sure that we have farms that are producing for the population of Ontario. And there are different things that we can do, different levers that we can take advantage of to help with that. And one of them, I'll talk about, it'll seem like a sidebar on it, but it makes so much more sense when you look at it this way. One of the things that I think is fantastic has been, because of high-speed internet, the automated milking machines. And I bring this up because dairy farms take up a fair bit of land. You have to have enough feed land for the dairy cattle. An automatic milking system allows the cows to actually milk themselves. They come into the stall when they're ready to get milked. And what we have found with it is that a cow is producing about 50% more milk when they're in that stage of milking by doing it this way. And the idea is that a happy cow produces more milk, and they're happy when they get to milk themselves on it. So we're seeing those dairy farms that have gone to the automated system reducing their head of cattle by almost 50%. That actually frees up some of the farmland that they have for other uses. It could be that it becomes cash crops. It could potentially be that when it's simply grazing land because it's not very good to grow anything, that's something then that potentially could be severed off. These are the types of things that you have to be looking at doing to make sure that you can open up in an intelligent way without creating other challenges for other groups. And that's the approach that we have been taking over the last 4 years and will continue to take on it. I'm very proud of the fact that our Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has actually had 4 different housing bills to make adjustments because, as I said, it's incremental with where the municipalities are and where we can get them to be. We still have more work, and I will absolutely commit to continuing that collaboration with them and continuing to work with Minister Clark on that to make sure that we can eventually get to the spot that we need to. But it will have to be done incrementally.
Can I just, I can't trust my own home to make it through a Zoom meeting uninterrupted, and I live in the Old North End. So these are great cows, and I wish them all the best, but I think that our infrastructure doesn't support automated milking until we have high-speed internet throughout our rural lands. I will confess that I am a teacher, and I have been working for the members of my union, and it's been a busy few years. So I confess that a lot of my attention has been focused straight on them, but I'm inferring from the conversations that I've been hearing in the last while that there is a fairly combative relationship between the provincial government and the municipal government. And so I will come back again to, it is not helpful or productive to have that kind of relationship with people that are making decisions. And my approach is to find ways that we can communicate positively and work towards mutual understanding. And that's listening to your feelings and municipal feelings and all the other stakeholders' feelings, and taking them all seriously and trying to find a path that works for everyone. And that's not always possible, but that is my goal, and that is the spirit in which I communicate with the enemy in my own profession. So I think that I imagine that you as realtors, when you are trying to sell houses in rural areas, the fact that there is not insufficient broadband is a real problem. And frankly, that problem has existed for the last 4 years. There's been time to make the investments to work on rural broadband, and it hasn't happened. So this is something that the NDP is committed to, because it's an equity piece. When kids were shut down and sent home during the pandemic to protect them, many of them who lived in our rural areas, but even frankly in our city centers, had trouble accessing online schooling because we don't have the infrastructure. And that is infrastructure that we have known that we needed for decades. And so instead of being able to work from the safety of their own homes to do their virtual learning, they were sitting in cars outside of McDonald's to get the Wi-Fi that they needed to participate in school. The kinds of infrastructure that the NDP is committed to in the Green New Democratic deal will improve the value of existing homes and create many more. I said earlier 250,000 homes. I apologize. Now I'm looking at the numbers. Always look at the numbers on the page. 1.5 million new homes is what we are committed to over the next decade. So, and we want to do that in ways that make those homes more valuable, by making sure that the natural treasures that are there are protected and preserved, both for their inherent beauty and the effect that they have in stabilizing our environment, but also because they improve the value, the price value and the enjoyment value of the homes that are near them. So I will work and talk with you and take your concerns seriously. I will also take the concerns of other stakeholders seriously, and I will deal with you in a respectful and collaborative way.
Greg.
Yeah, so the question was about severing property in agricultural areas, and I'm glad that we got to high-speed internet and happy cows. I want to say that this is something that is very personal to me. So I grew up in Otonabee Township on a lot that was severed from my grandmother's farm. I know how important it is to families to make sure that their children can live close to the farm and help with important agricultural work that we're doing. And when I got the nomination in November, we sent out a request to every single municipal councillor in Trent Lakes and North Kawartha. We had some really, really great meetings. And this was something that was raised with me over and over again, was concern about this change by the provincial government that would remove the ability for families to be able to build a home. And I agree that this is a very sustainable way to help build more housing in rural areas, but without changing the character of farmland and neighborhoods. It helps people stay in their homes as long as they possibly can stay in their homes. So people who retire on their farm can have their kids living on the farm as well, to make sure that that land is used for the agriculture. It's really, really important. And so for me personally, it's something that I oppose, changing that regulation to not allow the severing of land. I think that we want to make sure that we're protecting our farmland. We have some some incredible, amazing farmland in Peterborough-Kawartha. Yes, in the Canadian Shield, we probably are only going to be farming rocks, but there's some really, really wonderful farmland also in Peterborough-Kawartha that we need to make sure that we protect. But we need to make sure that families have the resources to be able to farm that land effectively in an environmentally sustainable way. And allowing families to sever off a property is one of the ways that we can do that, and it's something that I really support.
Great. I just wanted, I got a little off there. I want to give you the same opportunity to answer the question because it's great that we go with cows and internet, because that shows how complex these issues are. I mean, all these things work together. But really, my question was more around your commitment, if elected, to actually listening to municipal ground truthing groups rather than sitting in an office somewhere in the province and drawing circles.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree. Again, I think that we need to make sure that we're listening to all stakeholders in this process. And yes, there were mistakes that have been made. I think back to the answer that Dave Smith gave to the previous question, and when he talks about it, he talks about it like they've not been in government for the last 4 years, about all the things that they need to do to make sure that these things are fixed. He spoke about the 4 housing bills that this government has passed without, I think, once getting it right. We need to make sure that we're partnering with all stakeholders and making sure that, yes, we are reviewing municipal rules where that makes sense, and yes, making changes. But those changes can't be made without a true partnership with municipalities, with landowners, with environmental groups, nonprofits, and others. And so that is the skill that I bring to this job. That's what I've spent my career doing, is bringing people together and coming to consensus, because we know that changing these regulations is so much easier if we can get all parties in a room and we can talk out everybody's disagreements and come to a conclusion that it's helpful for everybody. So that is the strategy that I would take as the MPP to make sure we bring everyone together.
Thank you for the question. Maps are very important for ground truthing, and in order for that to happen, there needs to be funding for conservation authorities and who have been cut by previous and current governments or underfunded. And people need to be on the ground. I agree with that. At the same time, environmental land should not be degraded while those await for an evaluation. And as well, there's a process to evaluate provincially significant wetlands that hasn't been respected or adequate in terms of timelines. The former environmental commissioner pointed out that there was a 260-year backlog of wetland evaluations, and that more resources need to be put into evaluating natural spaces on the ground accurately. And we can't put a warehouse within a provincially significant wetland. Duffins Creek is an example.
Can I jump in for a sec? Because I think one aspect of this that hasn't come up yet is one of the things that I think we perceive of as red tape is actually just massive delay. And one of the reasons for delay is we've underfunded our public services, we've underfunded our conservation authorities, and so the delay is simply we don't have enough people to do these jobs. And when you don't have enough people, then you don't have the time and the resources to go out and actually stand on the land. One of my sons actually had a job a few years ago. Who knew this? But apparently the province inventories all of our forests. They like count them. They count the trees. And so my son's job was to actually get plonked onto land and literally walk on the land and do surveys of what trees were there so that the surveys were complete and accurate. It's that kind of on the ground assessment that's necessary so that mistakes like the ones that you have given examples of, so that those don't happen, and also so that we have accurate data to work from when decisions are made so that the decisions are good. But again, I come back to when the delays are because there aren't enough people to do the jobs, the only solution to that is get more people. And those are good paying jobs, often unionized. So we've got unionized workers doing good work to make sure good decisions are made that have good impacts on everyone who is in agreement that we need more homes.
Thank you. That certainly is another path we could go down in terms of our workforce or lack thereof. But I would like to switch it up a little bit in that obviously with housing being such a huge topic in this upcoming election, and we've been talking about the supply of it, the other focus that has been hit on in this discussion that I'm seeing in the media is the process of consumers getting these houses. So it's specifically coming down, and there's a focus on the realtors and how we're getting people through that process, which in my opinion is 100% driven by supply and demand. So there's been some talk about changes to the process of our profession in terms of, I know you guys call it blind bidding. That's one term for it. It's not really our favorite. But so I'd like to maybe talk to you all about and get your input on how you see changes to the real estate profession and your thoughts on what those are and how do you think it's going to change this issue that we're dealing with. Robert, I'll start with you.
Yes. Oh. Yeah, thank you. So we don't, we're not supportive of blind bidding, and so we will move to end that practice. And what the Green Party sees is it will be more clear and people don't overbid, drive up prices, as well as and not energy, home inspections are important in the home buying process. And what the Green Party has been seeing, and it's been reported in the media, is that people are skipping out on that process, and that impacts jobs, and we lose out on the opportunity to retrofit a lot of the homes for climate change. And changing that would eliminate some of the hidden surprises, as well as creating more jobs or stabilizing the ones that are in existence. So those are the main changes that the Green Party sees in the real estate field.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Dave?
When we take a look at real estate, it's one of those interesting things because for some, it is purely a business transaction. They want to know what the selling price is, what the conditions are, what the closing date is, and that's all they want to know. And then there are others who are looking at it as this is their home, and they want to leave that home to somebody else. And we need to make sure that when we're dealing with real estate, that we're doing it respective of both of those. I've had a couple of homes. I've had someone come to us to put an offer in. He was significantly lower than what we were looking for, and they explained their case to us. There are people where that makes a big difference. You may have a senior who's got a home that they had their family grow up in it. There's a lot of great family memories. And what they want to do is they want to leave it to another family. And making sure that the process allows for that is a good way of doing it. What I think our biggest challenge is not the process of purchasing or selling your home. Our biggest challenge is that we don't have any inventory. And that's what's driving up the price. The price is not being driven up because one person is deciding that they're going to be secretive about how much they're going to pay. The price is being driven up because there's one home and 25 offers on it. If we want to solve the problem of rising home prices, we don't solve that problem by changing the process of how real estate agents deal with it. We solve that problem by finding ways to increase the supply. That is the biggest challenge that we have. And if we want homes prices to stabilize, if we don't want them to continue to rise the way they are, looking at this area as a prime example, we've had these conversations a number of times. We need 1,200 to 1,400 listings at any given time in this area to satisfy the demand. This morning, when I looked, I think it was 302. That's what drives up the price. It's not the process of buying the house that drives up the price. It's the fact that there are none for sale that is driving up the price.
And you're absolutely correct on that. It is absolutely a supply and demand problem, and that has created the multiple offers, the inability to get conditions put in, one being home inspections, the other one being financing. So just to clarify, your government would allow the process, allow the seller the choice of how they want their house sold, and be it with quote unquote blind bidding or otherwise, you're committed to allowing the seller to have that choice?
I believe that the seller should have that choice, whether they
Okay.
want to have it opened up as completely open and put all of the offers on the table for everyone to see, or continuing the process the way it is right now. I don't believe the process is the problem. I believe it is a supply and demand problem.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I want to agree. Absolutely, the problem that's at the heart of this is that we just need more homes. We need more homes across the province. We need more homes in Peterborough-Kawartha, in the city of Peterborough and in the county. And we need to partner with municipalities and builders and others to build those homes. But I do want to address your specific question on blind bidding. Because we know that it has been a frustrating process. Now, real estate agents do amazingly important work. We should be very grateful for the help that they have provided, especially in this incredibly hot housing market. I think that people have really, really benefited from the work of real estate agents. But there is a problem, and there is a lot of frustration around the blind bidding process. So let me tell you what our plan is around that. We want to work with the federal government to implement a home buyer's bill of rights, which will reform the blind bidding process to make the history of house sale prices more transparent. And I think that's what people are looking for. They understand that the housing market has been really hot here in Peterborough-Kawartha. They understand that prices have gone up, but they just feel like they're in the dark when they're making their bids. And I think having price transparency is going to be super, super important, especially for those first-time home buyers that are trying to get into the market. We're also going to make home inspections a legal right for home buyers and regulate and license home inspectors. We'll require all residential real estate listings to publicly disclose expected commission rates, along with increasing penalties for unethical real estate transactions. Now, we'll enhance consumer protections for new home buyers, including reducing the amount of time it takes to resolve building defects. And finally, developers who cancel projects have a responsibility to treat prospective homebuyers fairly and honestly. So we'll require developers who cancel projects to refund buyers sooner on clearer contracts and with significantly higher interest rates on those lost deposits. And one other issue that I think I want to mention, and this is happening in Peterborough-Kawartha, it's happening across the entire province of Ontario, is that we've had foreign buyers come in and scoop up a bunch of our real estate, not to live in it, but to use as an investment because the real estate prices have been going up so significantly. And so we have a plan to address that, and that includes putting an empty homes tax of 5% of assessed value on non-Canadian owners and 2% for Canadian owners with vacant residential units in all urban areas. So that's to make sure that if somebody comes in and buys a home as an investment, which is fine, and that's great, but we need to make those spaces available as places for people to live when we're in this housing crisis. It's been identified by everybody here on the stage. And so we need to make sure that we are helping people to make the right choice to be, if they're going to be purchasing real estate as an investment, that they make that real estate available to rent so that people can find a safe, affordable place to live.
One thought I have just to further that, it is in other countries, in other markets, blind bidding has been changed, so it's no longer, it's an open bid, it's an open auction. It has been shown in those markets not to be effective in terms of, maintaining the price levels or bringing them down, because it does come down to supply and demand. So with the thought of applying that theory here, why do we think it's going to work any different in this market when in other markets it has shown not to have changed the price, and then some would suggest, exasperated the situation?
Yeah, so I think that's a very fair point. I didn't say that we were going to outlaw blind bidding entirely, that we would just reform the process to increase the amount of transparency that there is for both home buyers and home sellers. And I think that's all people expect, is that there is that transparency in the market in terms of both prices and commissions. I think in any market, that's what the consumers should expect. And so yes, we are going to put in the home buyers Bill of Rights to make sure that people know exactly what they're getting into when they buy a home. But I agree with the premise of your question that we need to be learning from other jurisdictions where things have not necessarily worked. I think you pointed out quite rightly that the problem really is, at the heart of this, is supply. And that's why I think you've seen broad agreement across the stage that we need to build more homes as the very first thing. But I think better transparency in the market is also a good thing. So it's not just one or the other, it's doing both together to make sure that consumers are protected, but also we build the homes that we need.
Thank you. Jen?
Kate, I'm not a real estate expert, and you guys are. So can you please tell me, because you've mentioned it, and I see the discomfort when you use that term, how would you describe it in a way that is not using, a term you don't like?
Okay. I don't know. Can anybody else throw out a different term? In all reality, it is blind bidding, but I guess maybe it's the bidding word that is kind of troublesome to me. It is a process of, consumers are working with a professional realtor in the vast majority of cases. We advise, we look at comparables, we look at, 100 different things, and we advise. And so we're making recommendations in terms of what price and the market value and so on. Maybe a better word would be confidential offering.
Okay.
That might be it. So
Thank you. I guess, again, so here I'm demonstrating for you, because real life, it's happening. I'm never afraid to admit when I don't know a thing, and that's how I become more knowledgeable. And so I need to speak to experts, and I've had really amazing real estate agents in the past. Dave Robertson is somebody I stay in touch with, and I really trust his advice. And I can't imagine making an offer on a house without the assistance of a real estate agent. It's one of the biggest purchases I'll ever make in my life. And so we rely on the expertise of the real estate agents. What as the NDP's role in this is to make sure that bad operators and bad operators are not part of that process. We want to make sure that it's good, ethical real estate agents who are providing good, ethical advice, which the vast majority of you do, I'm absolutely sure.
And which is also, if I may interrupt, why we have a regulatory body
right. Thank you.
that does govern all of that.
And we tend to, let's not frame this, regulation is not bad. Regulation is good, and it benefits us all. It keeps us all playing on a fair playing field, and it keeps bad operators from undercutting the ethical operators. So the NDP, what we're working on is we want to just make sure that there are protections for home buyers, many of whom hopefully will be new home buyers, young home buyers, who are making a really important decision. We don't want them to have to buy a house without a house inspection and then discover that the house has major faults that render that a bad investment. We also want to make sure that that bad developers are not canceling contracts so that they can force up prices. We want to make sure that that we can standardize purchase agreements so that there's no hidden small print that, you know, that an unethical real estate agent is maybe messing with a buyer, because, you know, most of us are not experts. You guys are the experts, but we need to make sure that you guys are all operating fairly and that the bad operators are rooted out. Sorry, I keep using that term. But so, and we also want to stimulate new ownership by offering 10% down payments for new home buyers, people who don't already own a home, and that will be means tested to 200,000 family income and lower. So we do want to encourage and stimulate home buying. We also have to get new homes. We've talked about that a lot. I think we all can agree. But we just want to make sure that consumers are protected, and that's in everybody's best interest.
Absolutely, thank you. So we're getting near the end of our session here today. So maybe we'll just throw out one more question each. So I'll give, do you have another one?
Are you going to throw it to me?
I'm going to throw it to you.
Well, I've been debating whether to ask this question because it's loaded. We know the absolute...
Okay, thanks very much.
Hold on, the other questions haven't somewhat been loaded, just to be clear.
Just to be clear. We have a significant issue at the municipal levels across Ontario. We just do, okay? We can't hide behind that. There's not only the NIMBYs, there's the bananas that are rearing their head to build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. We've heard every government say, we're committed to removing roadblocks.
Yeah.
When in fact that roadblock is a municipality, would your government remove that roadblock?
Jump in.
That's an interesting question. So are you saying we'd remove the roadblock by getting rid of the municipality or getting rid of the council?
Well, the solution would be up to you on how you do that through consultation. But what's becoming very clear, where you have 8 municipalities feeding up to another municipality, feeding up to a province, that's a broken system. Very broken.
So what I'll say on this is again, I'm kind of repeating myself on it. What happens in the city of Peterborough affects what happens in the county of Peterborough. And we do have a difference of opinion right now between county council and city council on a number of different issues. If we take a look at the growth plan for Ontario, just as an example, it's 8,000 homes that the expectation is that will come into Peterborough over the next 10 years. But in the county, it's about 800. When you look at Millbrook, just as an example, they could eat up that 800 homes by themselves without the other townships having any ability to add any more homes. We met with county council on it. There was actually a delegation that came to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in March of this year with a request that Peterborough County be taken out of the Greater Golden Horseshoe for development. But the city of Peterborough doesn't want to be taken out of the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So now we're in a position where municipalities that should be complementary to each other, that need to be working together with each other, have a completely different vision on what should happen and how we should make this work. It's one of those cases where we need the municipalities to work together on it. Happy to facilitate the conversations, happy to have a mediator come through, happy to have that type of work done on it. When there was talk about annexation with Cab Monaghan, just as an example, I was happy to have a mediator involved in it, but we couldn't get the two municipalities to work together to actually do that. And it's one of those cases where I don't want to pass the buck, but we have to have councils who are willing to work with each other. We have to have councils who are willing to take some of the advice from those at the province to work together And if we have a council of 9 in a region who don't want to work with the others, it makes it very, very difficult to move things forward in an expedited manner. There are times, and this is why we have 4 housing bills that have come in. There are times where you have to take that slow, incremental approach to bring different councils up, to get them to that point of consensus. And it has to be done in an incremental approach, because if it's not, you accomplish nothing. If you try to hold out until you're at the point where everyone agrees on it, you get nothing done. The best approach to it, when you find yourself in that position where there isn't consensus amongst multiple councils who should be working together, then you do it incrementally. And you do it in a way then that you're taking a baby step forward. You may not be able to get to the end point right away, but you're taking that step forward. And the expression is that a trip of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. You cannot get to that 1,000-mile point until you make the first step. So doing it incrementally gets those steps and gets you closer to that end result.
Go ahead.
Okay. I want to agree with a lot of what was just said. I think we absolutely need municipal councils and municipalities to be working together and to agree that we absolutely need to build more housing. But it is, I've said this before, it is a collaborative approach that is going to get things done. Forcing municipal councils, we talked about, are you going to force the city or the county to do specific things? I mean, that approach might get results in the short term, but in the longer term, we really need to partner with these municipalities and do the really hard work of convincing councillors and neighbors and others that densifying and building more homes is in the best interests of absolutely everyone. And it needs to be a balanced approach. And so I talked about the $300 million that we're going to be allocating for municipalities to help hire more people in the planning departments to make sure that permits get approved as quickly as possible. But it's also about updating our growth framework to recognize that building homes for all current and the future Ontarians is a fundamental obligation of our local governments. And something else that I want to raise here is that right now it's almost impossible to build modest family-friendly housing such as semi-detached homes, triplexes, and townhomes across most of Ontario, including in Peterborough-Kawartha, except for the change that happened recently that we talked about earlier. And exclusionary zoning prevent new homes from being built where people want to live. And it's an important step towards zoning reform to work with municipal partners to allow homes with up to 3 units and 2 stories to be built as of right across the province, with this permission also extending to secondary and laneway suites. So I think that change in and of itself is going to help make sure that we build more homes in Peterborough-Kawartha and across the entire province. And again, I just want to reinforce, it is about building those partnerships. It's about bringing those municipal councillors and neighbors on board. That is hard work. It is really hard work, and there's lots of people that are opposed to this. But when we take their views into account and then we build a process where everyone feels included, that's the way that we're going to come to consensus and actually get those homes built.
Okay. Robert?
Yes. So we will have a Yes in My Backyard campaign because oftentimes councils only hear from NIMBYism individuals, and they should hear from people that want certain development. And one example is in Northwest World in the city of Peterborough, there was a proposal to build an apartment building that was, I think it was six stories, which ended up going to the tribunal. And the main concern that people had was that it was a tall building. So we definitely need educate the public so that the councils understand the importance of densification and why all these homes are important. And then we also need to change the Planning Act and have measures so that densification is happening. Right now, the Auditor General report from the Environmental Commissioner said that density targets that are in place have not been met, and we also need to educate that it doesn't need to look like Toronto, addressing the missing middle, having variety of homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
Well, I am aware of the time, and I do want to take the opportunity to thank you all. This has been a very interesting and enjoyable experience, and thank you for you coming out, those of you that are watching. I learned some really important advice when I was young, and that was always be wary of people who talk trash about their exes. Because if they're trash talking their exes, they're probably trash talking you when you're not around. So that was really good advice that I've carried through my life in many different ways. And sometimes I joke with the employers at Kawartha Pine Ridge, you get the union you deserve. If you don't work collaboratively with me, I'm going to put up roadblocks and I'm going to make your life difficult. But if we can work well, you're going to get that union. You're going to get one that works well with you. So, I've been in situations where I've had the opportunity to do mediations when I've had people that are in conflict. And what I know, and I think this is self-evident, is that for mediation to be effective, it's really important that there be trust all around, and because people won't open up and they're not going to work in a good way if they are fearful. So what I will guarantee for you is I will treat your concerns with respect, because you deserve that. I will listen to other voices as well, and I will work collaboratively. I know we've tossed that word around, but that word means a lot to me, and it really is the foundation of how I have operated in my work and in my life. I take that very seriously. I will work with you, I will work with all stakeholders, and I will work on developing the kinds of connections and relationships at the municipal level that will encourage good functioning and good behavior amongst us all. And that's all I can promise. We can't always guarantee that we'll have great municipal government or provincial government or federal government for that matter. This is a democracy. The municipal government was elected, as we will be electing our provincial leaders. And if there's a problem right now, it's that we don't have civil engagement in the democratic process. We need to encourage good people to run for office. If we don't do that, and if we don't treat those positions with respect and dignity and give them, work in good faith, then the kinds of people that are going to run are the ones that we don't want. Our mayor has been receiving death threats and threats of violence, as did our federal leader leader Jagmeet Singh. And we need to be encouraging good people to run, and one of the ways we do that is by always engaging in good and respectful and positive discourse. And I thank you for this positive discourse today. Thank you.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today. I just wanted to thank Dave, Robert, Greg, and Jen for your time today. We really appreciate it. Thanks for enduring our questions, and I know some of them are quite pointed, but I appreciate that, your candor. Also like to thank the Peterborough-Kawartha Association of Realtors for partnering with us on this. Really do appreciate that. As we could see, that housing's a very complex issue. There's a lot of interdependencies that go on within it. Some good, some not. Fact is, though, we need 1 to 1.5 million homes just to keep up over 10 years. That's a daunting task. That's never been accomplished before. It's going to take an unprecedented speed by government. Anyone recognize that oxymoron there? It is, and that's our concern, is how do you speed this up, because this should have been going on 15 years ago. It will not happen with our current processes and attitudes, and I appreciate the baby steps, but sometimes to take a baby step, you need to take a leap. And someone said to me the other day, Garnet, you can't just hit people over the head, you have to have a conversation. I said, yeah, but I have to hit them over the head to have the conversation. Sometimes you do, okay? All eyes will and should be on municipalities, because that is where the roadblock is. And they need support, but they also need, especially in this city, to adopt a culture of accountability. And in the own report that was paid for by government and commissioned by our local politicians, that accountability is absolutely absent from this city, and that needs to change. So Ontario Home Builders Association launched our most edgy sort of campaign called Cut the, you fill in the blank. Our president is traveling Ontario, driving everywhere, and the amount of anger out there is profound around the lack of housing and the speed at which government doesn't move. He's quite, he expected it, but he's quite shocked by the level of frustration that is out there. He's driving around in a vehicle that says the average price of a home is now $1 million, which is 16 times the average income. The scary numbers. So this is a crisis. So we need to cut the NIMBYism, need to cut the bananas, cut the delays, cut the over-regulations, the excuses, cut the red tape, cut the blame. We talked a lot about collaboration. That's challenging among parties. It always is. So we need to cut the blame, cut the politicking, and quite frankly, cut the crap. That's our message. Cut the crap and get some houses built. And thank you very much to Robert. We've been using the YIMBY a lot lately. Yes, in my backyard. Yes, I actually want my kids and my grandkids to be able to live where I live. Yes, we do want to be able to have a community here where everyone enjoys home ownership. And yes, we do understand the housing continuum, that if you build homes, you will get people off the street. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.